Hello, everyone. This is C. Diesel, the Lushri, and King of the Comics. And
you're listening to the Then and Now podcast.
The thing is, y'all can't see y'all can't see his ASMR face. There's like old faces and then there's like Charlie faces. He's like all up in that mic, just with his beard whispering. It's a lot. It's a lot. I'm a grown man and it's still a lot.
That is true.
That was definitely, yeah.
Guys, this is definitely the return of ASMR Diesel. He's back like he never left. We are going to be discussing some interesting topics coming up here. Tropes are going to be a kind of a running series we're going to continue to work on for a little bit here, starting with that of heroes and the hero trope. Residential professional writer and just all around knowledge, elder, guru, old man, King of the Comics. Will you kind of give us your definition?
So many adjectives and pronouns there.
I don't know if any of them were flattering, but at least some of them were accurate, though. I'll take accurate. I'll take accurate over flattering every day, I guess. I am an old man. So the basic when it comes to tropes, for the most part, tropes are consistent, like thematics, I guess consistent themes or ideas that writers or storytellers use when it comes to dabbling in the expectations of a genre. So, for example, a common trope in a fight scene is for the hero to win. A cliche in a fight scene is for the hero to win using the power of friendship. One thing that people, I don't want them to be used interchangeably. I do think that tropes are fine. You can use tropes; they're tried and true. I do think that cliches are a problem. If that makes sense.
I agree with that. So what is it? Just slight tangent. If the power of friendship is a cliche, what is the power of family?
Oof.
Hell, that's what it is. Hell.
Yeah. But what's funny about that, though, there are even within that. Well, one thing we have to acknowledge too is the originators of ideas. It's hard to penalize them for using or if they establish something way back when. And it's one of the earliest times they've ever been used. It's hard to penalize them for that and say, oh, it's so cliche. One of the examples I go to is, and I know we all love Yu Hakusho, it's perfectly fine, but in Yu Hakusho, there's a fight where Yusuke is down and out against
Tagoro.
Is it Tagoro the first time I think he's fighting Tagoro? It's the time he's fighting one of the, it's not Tagoro. It's not Tagoro. But he's fighting somebody, and the guy has him pretty much dead to rights. And then he has to he's while Yusuke is thinking about all his friends and Kiko, what's his girlfriend's name?
Keiko.
He kind of like gets an extra urge of power. He's able to kind of beat the guy using, I think it's a spirit.
Oh yeah, he started using his soul energy instead of his spirit energy.
His soul energy.
About Keiko. That was in the against the 4 Saint Beasts. I can't remember the guy.
It was a guy who made multiple beasts of himself, copies of himself. Yeah, that was the idea. So the thing was, it's kind of what you would say, that's traditionally that's power of friendship. However, again, when the original manga kin wrote this was like in the early 90s or like in the late 80s or something like that, and then the anime came out in the mid 90s showing that, and so it's like, oh, that's the power of friendship. But again, at the time when it was written, it hadn't been done that much, and also like you said, there was a variation to it. It's soul energy as opposed to regular energy. So it's if you look at it now, if you go back and watch it now, it's like, oh, it's the power of friendship, but it's like you had to put it in context too.
So regarding tropes, could you guys give the audience just a couple examples of tropes in like popular media that they may have seen, whether it be movies, shows, anime, etc.?
I mean, I can go to the list of tropes that I got, but I mean, of course, you got the typical hero, anti-hero. We've got the where's my list? I should have been.
Well, maybe specifically because we're on the topic of like hero trope. Can you give like a specific like hero trope possibly? Rather than be, I'm assuming like MCU would be like a good place to start with that, right?
I mean, yeah. Any action movie is going to have their own variation of the hero trope. It's essentially the protagonist that is, typically morally, stout. Like it's Captain America. He's Scott Summers. He is Carol Danvers.
Summers morally stout though.
Scott Summers was definitely a Boy Scout early on. He became more of a everything else in later runs of his history. But like, the primary, he's boy in blue. Like, he's the perfect soldier. He's going to make the right call. He's that type of person, and you see those typically like all through 80s action movies, 90s action movies, and it's kind of getting redefined and tweaked now, but it's still overall the same trope.
So that trope in and of itself, I mean, cut you off. Oh, that trope in and of itself has a name. Most tropes have a kind of a name of some kind. So that trope is known as the golden boy, so to speak. Scott Summers was Xavier's golden boy. Now again, we're going back to like earlier Chris Claremont like era. Scott Summers way before we're kind of modern genocidal but yeah, I know what you're talking about. The golden boy type of protagonist that is kind of the morally righteous guy that's doing the right thing, lawful good, so to speak, or worse, lawful neutral. Yeah.
So at what point do you like teeter, like do you cross that line from going hero to anti-hero? Is it more of a altruism thing where you're just doing everything for the sake of the betterment of other people, or can you be a little bit selfish and still be considered a hero in this trope?
Well, I mean, the divide between a hero and an anti-hero isn't necessarily based off of like their selfishness. It's more so based off of where their morality aligns and what they're willing to do to accomplish what they want. So like, the Punisher, of course, obviously is one of the quintessential anti-heroes. He's trying to do good, but he's doing a bad thing to do that, right? Or you have Daredevil is, he's your hero. He's going to try to stop crimes from happening, but he's going to protect everyone in the process. He's going to make sure that people do get their due process and go through the legal system. I guess that's where the divide is, and that's why you see so many great stories are formed between that. Because again, that's Daredevil, Punisher you see pretty often. Scott Summers and Wolverine, you saw that clash happen pretty often in early X-Men stuff. I mean, it's a repeated thing. So actually, it's a good question.
So pretty much just kind of going outside of the normal construct of the societal rules to accomplish their task, essentially. Because I think the rules change. Like if murder is okay in this world, then technically they're not really an anti-hero because they're not really breaking the rules, or like going outside of what is socially acceptable to get what they need to get done.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing is too, it depends on, like you're saying, if murder's okay in this world, then it's okay to do it. Like I guess if you're saying these are soldiers, they're in a battlefield. Of course, everyone's killing everybody else. That's part of the trope. That's part of the norm. But if you're trying to say, since the quote unquote hero code that was in the comics back in the 50s, they made that officially. Pretty much any hero by definition could not kill. Even Batman, even though he started out with a gun, he could no longer kill. It became very much unorthodox. So that's when the Punisher came out. And the Punisher came out in the 70s, and he had guns blazing, killing folks left and right. Even though he was killing bad guys, he was still killing, and that by definition made him an anti-hero. He was no longer falling into the typical trope or using the typical methodology as heroes. Daredevil very much does everything he possibly can to his detriment not to kill, even if it harms himself over and over again. Spider-Man the same way. Batman traditionally will say the same villains over and over again, even though they can go about killing people over and over again themselves when they get released. So yeah, that's a perfect example right there of an anti-hero, is someone like the Punisher who does very unorthodox means who does essentially what heroes do, but he does it in a very, very unorthodox method. I will stop the crime, but I'll do it by killing the criminals.
So I think this is a little bit maybe possibly a reach here, but when you're looking at something way, way back in regards to the original Cap and the war propaganda that he was a part of, he was at war in World War II. And maybe again, Ethan, this is your prime heyday, so maybe you can tell me better than anybody else. In those comics where it was Cap committing murder, because he was at war, and I'd assume that back in those days they would depict him killing Nazis or defeat. I don't because I know in certain instances he was using a gun at some points. Yeah. Even in his first movie, he used a pistol at one point in the film and was killing Nazis, but he's still one of the prototypical versions that you would use to define what a hero is in the modern MCU and back then. Yeah. So where does that because again, that was to my point as far as it being socially acceptable. Is there something that obviously there's something that changed with like the rising of Spider-Man and Batman being really prevalent and having that similar trope of like being hyper focused on not killing. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to figure out like at what point and when that happened and like why then it was acceptable versus now you can't really be that hero, or like you get put into the category of an anti-hero if you commit murder.
Sure. I mean, obviously I'm 99% sure that when Cap first came out, because you think he's war propaganda, he actually he predated the Hays Code and the Hero Code and all that kind of stuff in the comic books. So he did have a pistol, he did kill. That happened. Yeah, very much so. And as far as like when it became like the line that you couldn't cross to do those type of things, it was mainly because of parents and pushback, and also Hays himself saying that this was doing more harm than good to children, because children were the primary readers of comics, obviously when they first came out, and they saw that if you were saying that these are the good guys and the good guys are killing, then you're saying killing is a good thing. Therefore, we need to stop this because you're telling kids to kill to get the job done, or telling them that violence is the answer for these type of situations, and so forth and so on. So I would say it was because of the pushback, primarily from the loud minority that may have thought that the comic books were harmful to kids, that made it happen. The same reason we have, I know it's a slight tangent, but the same reason we have ratings on video games, it was because of the vocal minority that video games are harmful to kids that kind of made these things happen with comic books, and in turn made it happen with what we consider quote unquote heroes. In another way too, it's the same thing with the shonen protagonists, where they just say, let's make the shonen protagonists themselves teenagers. Think about how many manga where the actual protagonists that do all kinds of insane, crazy things, world-saving or world-ending things, are literally teenagers in high school. It's a vast majority of it. We all love ourselves some Jujutsu Kaisen, JJK. Keep in mind, the leads are all in school still doing these type of things. So that's a big trope as well.
Mm-hmm. I think a big part of that too is, especially when it comes to the hero trope, and we talked about this briefly in a discussion we had on what we define as a hero. And I know for me, a big part of that was like being something that you can look up to, especially when it comes to shonen anime with characters like Naruto or Goku, to where they're defying the odds through effort and pure intentions and friendship and things of that nature. I feel like a lot of like the reason why we have so many children as main characters is, one, obviously, like you said, that initially manga and comics were probably like marketed towards kids to start with. But I think even as time gone on, and when things like JJK have gotten significantly darker, and you're still involving these high school age kids, part of it to me is having to do with like we see ourselves in these characters a lot more. Like we either have the nostalgia reflecting back to that age, or that at least be my thought process on why, like even to this day, consistently and shonen and even dark shonen, high school age or even younger kids are still like one of the main focal points of these series.
Well, I mean, when it comes to shonen specifically, like every shonen is about teenagers. Like if it's not about teenagers or about that high school to like 8th grade range, it's not a shonen. That's a seinen or the ecchi or many other category of anime. But I mean, shonen is always going to be around teenagers, young adults, like, trying to overcome some type of greater evil, through means of, like you said, like training, power, friendship, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, like, I mean, it's not like it's not like they're choosing to do that. If they don't do that, it no longer qualifies into the genre, which means it's like when it comes to promotion for anime and at least on the Japanese end, it's not going to get as much footing behind it, which is why a lot of the people try to target that shonen area, because that's where the most support is and where the most attention is.
The way I saw it, because when I was doing the Blerd Jeopardy a while back and I was doing the research on it with like the seinen and the other genres, the way I understood it was it's not the makeup of what the genre is, but who it's marketed towards, like to your point. And it's probably more to do with your point as far as like it's similarly to kids' toys nowadays. Like you want it to fit into this age range because these are going to be the main consumers of this thing. Like it's going to be kids, so let's market this towards children. I wasn't sure of how much of like the actual structural makeup of a shonen is kids in this, is why I was kind of questioning that, because I'm like, because sometimes you'll have series where like the kid will grow up and that kid will be an adult now with like well, technically, like Naruto's a bad example because Boruto's the main character at some point, but there are other anime that where like you focus
Dragon Ball
on
Z.
that. Yeah, you like Dragon Ball's the main example.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the main protagonist, and he started off as a child. Yeah, I don't know. That's just me, I guess, getting off track there. But
because I think the word, I'm paraphrasing, but I believe the word shonen in and of itself literally translates to like teenage boy, basically.
Mm-hmm. Literally.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of that idea. I mean, also now one thing too is we have to. I know there isn't really a big three now, but there is a dark trio. They call it a dark trio. The dark trio, technically, they're not. I think the two of them are seinen, right? Because it's a Hell's Paradise, which I don't know that's not really a shonen. Then also Chainsaw
all
Man.
three of them. Well, Hell's Paradise and Jujutsu Kaisen were both in Shonen Jump, so technically they both
they are. But would you? They are.
Subject matter wise, no, not shonen in the slightest.
No. AOT is shown into at that point.
I don't think AOT was in Shonen Jump. Was it?
No, it was not. It was a different. Yeah, it was not in Shonen Jump at all.
I mean, let me check. I need double check. It's not. Yeah. It is not.
Interesting.
But here's the thing though. That's where it gets kind of a little murkier because obviously Eren Yeager and them back in the day were teenagers. They weren't in high school, but they were teenagers. It's just how it is as far as easier to market.
I wish they were in high school.
Yeah, it'll be easier. But what's funny about that though too is how it's antithetical to how oftentimes things are for like American audiences or Western audiences. Like, oftentimes, I know for a kid, the heroes we saw, they're always like grown adults that are meant to be more virtuous, like even the G.I. Joe or whatnot, or Transformers. They were grown adults in some capacity doing things, and it's meant to aspire, like Dev just said, you meant to aspire to be like this person as opposed to as opposed to directly relating to who they are now, so to speak.
All right. So to redirect back, I guess, to the main topic in regards to heroes specifically, give me because we're pretty much writers here essentially. Some of us more accredited than others. Could you both kind of give me how you would personally use the hero trope to your advantage if you had to write a story that involved the hero? Would you go the more traditional route, or do you tend to like want to try to push the boundaries as far as you can as far as what's considered a hero in that trope? Because we've seen it all at this point.
I mean, when it comes to my approach to storytelling, I like to show heroes, like the hero trope, in direct contrast to anti-heroes and villains. Like I kind of like to make them very clear what they are. We can kind of attest to this with like Briarlands. I intentionally set it up so they were, three very distinct factions of people that are morally aligned to whatever they are, whether they're a hero, anti-hero, or a full-on villain. And I just make it so that they have to collectively come to decisions from that approach of what that trope is, if that makes any sense. So that, because I don't want to throw any spoilers to what's coming to the series itself, but I mean, it's at a crossroads where a character has wronged like all three, the villain, the anti-hero, and the hero. The anti-hero and the villain, like, let's take this guy out. The hero is going to say like, no, we can't do this because X, Y, and Z. And I like to kind of force a conflict between those moralities to make it very apparent. But I mean, I can't necessarily say that's anything special. I think I've seen it in other places too. But right. What do you think?
I agree. Especially even using that example of Brian. I'll get into spoilers, obviously, but that was something I was aware of when based off what you and Stan come up with the story, and then the way once I started writing it, fleshing it out more, it was still what I call. I don't know if it's actually officially called this. You guys can crucify me if I'm wrong, but I call the shonen trio, which is where you have essentially it's two males and a female. That is a trope that has been used. I won't say it's a cliche. I'll say it's a trope that's been used several times, everywhere from Naruto to Chainsaw Man to obviously JJK, where you have that same kind of alignment, and you play with the actual characters' personalities are within that, or their character alignment within that. So when it comes to Briarlands, for example, again, without getting into spoilers, where they fall on the morality scale is a little bit different, or where they start from is a little bit different. But once they get together, you kind of see them all kind of falling into that place again. Essentially, there are two males. There's a woman that involved. They had to work together regardless whether they want to do it. and all kinds of shenanigans ensue, so to speak. It is a tried and true method that works pretty well. It's not always effective, but Star Wars, the sequels, for example, but it can be highly effective if done right, I think. Another thing that I'm sure you guys have both read, one of my stories, Slade and Ash. I did the same thing there, where I had it started off very much as a bromance, kind of a buddy cop situation, and then the female character was introduced there, and it was meant to be very much again the kind of shonen trio, and it played out that way. It's a formula that for whatever reason it just tends to work. Now there are plenty of folks who have said that it's kind of an antiquated system because you always had to have two males and one woman. I get that entirely, and I've seen other systems before where they have two women and a guy, and that's perfectly fine too. Or just three women altogether, whatever it might be. But for whatever reason, trios where they have two very different personalities tend to work really, really well. This is what it is.
Okay. I know for me on my end, I agree with your guys' preferences as well. But I think for me, in regards to how I write characters or even how I think about characters, I tend to really enjoy the emotional, psychological, and sociological aspect of them. So kind of breaking down what the pros and cons are of their lifestyle. So with the heroes, like somebody like All Might, I think would be a really great example of something that I enjoy in regards to this is the picture perfect, aesthetically pleasing hero character. But when you look at his responsibilities and the toll being this type of person has had on him physically, emotionally, and I think his condition in that anime is a great representation of like him being broken down and this losing himself or losing who he once was to having to be this thing consistently for a long period of time. Batman is another great example of that, of where there's dark sides to being that hero and the hyperfixation on not killing, when at some point you could argue that they may have been the best thing to do with characters like the Joker committing genocide in some instances of the DC comics. But showing that duality of a trope to me is something that's great because it provides for a lot of different ways you can take it from not only that own character's perspective, but if you're introducing like side characters that represent the different parts of what makes that thing difficult. So rather it be the Joker committing murder or characters like a Catwoman coming in to being an anti-hero, more so tipping that line and kind of luring Batman into being a part of that, and showing all these different aspects of that thing. I think it's just so much you can do with that. And I love going down that path and picking at that.
I agree. That's where it gets. Here's one thing too, is that you have to acknowledge how I think you need to understand the fundamentals before you're able to kind of go against them or break them, so to speak. So a really good example of having essentially, we all love ourselves some Hunter x Hunter. Hunter x Hunter, clearly the writer really, really cut his teeth. I forgot his name. What's his name again? The creator, writer of the manga king that did on this. Togashi?
So it's Togashi. It's I don't want to say it's Hideo Togashi, but that sounds wrong.
They'll barbecue us for saying it's not in the wrong way.
Right.
I believe it's Togashi. I'm saying I believe it's Togashi. But the writer, creator of Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter, he clearly really honed his craft on Yu Yu Hakusho.
Yoshiro Togashi, I'm sorry.
Yoshiro Togashi. So when Togashi he honed his craft and storytelling on Yu Yu Hakusho. So when he wrote Hunter x Hunter, he was able to subvert a lot of expectations and subvert a lot of tropes and cliches with Hunter x Hunter. So for example, you see Gon and Killua, especially in the manga, where if you look at them, they look like they're meant to be the exact opposite of each other. One has a tall, black, spiky hair. One has like the laid down white hair, and it's very kind of slouched and casual, calm. One's all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And the thing is, what's funny about that is they actually are not the rivals. This is not the Goku and the Vegeta. This is they're the best friends from the jump. Mm-hmm. And so it's clearly a subversion. And that everything that Togashi does with Hunter x Hunter is meant to be the subversion. The actual tournament arc he does is very much as far as like, as opposed to you lose once you're out, is you get to battle as long as you want in this tournament until you win. And as long as you win, eventually you get to pass in this test, for example. So I think a big step with tropes is if you understand how they're supposed to be utilized properly, then you can have fun going against them or bucking the trend with those. I think that's what anti-heroes are in general. I believe that anti-heroes are the answer to heroes. I know that everyone's a fan of Deadpool, but Deadpool was definitely a direct response to all the Golden Boys in Marvel Comics back in the day.
So let's not get too far into, because we're gonna do like a whole episode right after this with the anti-heroes. I want to burn the clip on anti-heroes.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But I think, do you guys have any like close? We're pretty much at time that we usually go to, but before we close out, do you guys have any other like sentiments or points you want to expound upon in regards to the hero trope itself?
I mean, it's very easy to get lazy within the hero trope and just kind of make your guy stoic and just righteous. Don't do that. Make them a person. That's the last thing I'll say on that.
Professor,
I completely agree. But exactly what Otis said. Make them a fully fledged character. You can definitely have a hero or a protagonist. But I think the thing is that back in the day, of course, people didn't want to make them fully fleshed out or fully well-rounded characters. They were afraid to give the characters a quote-unquote a flaw, which is where they actually have some kind of something about them that makes them imperfect. And I think that's to make them relatable, that's the most essential ingredient in that, is giving them something that makes them kind of human, making them not perfect in some way. So yeah, definitely make your characters, flesh them out, don't make them just one note.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, this has been Captain Diesel, Lushvi, King of the Comics, Ethan Murphy, and you.
You're listening to the Then and Now podcast.
And we'll see you guys next time. Peace.